Now, as I've mentioned before, if you want, you can set up the system so that archives can be created automatically. The archives that are going to be created are going to have a specific name that you choose, based on a naming convention that I'll show you how to set up. But basically, they're going to have this kind of a date format, which is great because if you looked at the previous archives, it was kind of obscure and hard to figure out what was in those archives. But as you can see, at the date at which we shift into that archive and create that archive, we will give that creation date. So you can tell right from the name what the creation date is. Now, this feature of automatic archive creation, it is not enabled by default. It is something that you have to do. Oh, and I forgot to mention, these archives created automatically will be the same size as the primary archive, which of course is what people typically desire. So what you would do is go into the tuning parameters, and you're going to need to create this. It doesn't exist yet. It's called archive_auto archive file root, and that's where you specify the path of that archive file. And actually, let me distinguish this further. You would specify the path, and then in addition to the path, you're going to specify whatever root name you would like for that archive file. So it's going to be placed into that directory with that root or prefix that you'll see at the beginning of that archive file. So given what you see right there, for example, that will create an archive that looks like this. It's in that directory, and it has this name, auto followed by that date. Now, a couple of other things to warn you about. I mean, once you do this, once you enable this feature, we're no longer going to use the fixed archives. So if you do have fixed archives that are empty, we're no longer going to be shifting into those empty fixed archives. You might as well just unregister them and delete them to save space. If you need to disable this feature later on, we suggest you simply clear the value. You do not set the value to 0. So for a lot of these parameters, you would simply set that value equal to 0. Not for this one. You would just clear it, make sure it's blank, and that will disable this feature. Also, you've got to monitor your disk space if you use this feature. And to be honest, that makes me a little, well, I have to admit I'm a little hesitant to tell people that this is absolutely the best thing to do in all cases. If you're not sure you're going to have the time to monitor your disk space, even if you've got a lot of free disk space, you may consider, well, just consider the impact that will happen if you omit or if you forget to check disk space, and then 6 months, a year later, you actually run out of disk space, because of course, as we create archives, we're going to get less and less disk space. If it's a virtual memory machine, like most Windows boxes are, it's going to get slower and slower. You may eventually crash the operating system if you run out of disk space. So just consider that and make sure you're monitoring disk space. Also, one of the advantages of the old method of doing this, in which you create a bunch of empty archives all at the same time, is that when you create those empty archives, they're going to be fairly contiguous on a disk drive, and it ends up being less fragmented. So, one of the arguments of doing it the old school way, where you don't create these automatically, is that you might get slightly better performance and speed. But it shouldn't be anything that should prevent you from using auto archive creation. Now, if for some reason we can't create any more archives, if the path doesn't exist, for example, then the system is going to roll back into that old behavior. So, if for some reason this auto creation fails, then we're simply going to roll back into the old behavior, which is to shift to the empty archive that's highest, or shift into the oldest archive. Now let's take a look at those tuning parameters that we've mentioned a couple of times already. I mentioned that you have to create this auto archive file root, and you would do that within the tuning parameters found in PI SMT. So I would do that under operation. Within operation, there's tuning parameters, and as you can see, here is that auto archive file root. If you wanted to set this up so that we do have a automatic archive created, again, as I said, simply put in the path in which you're going to do this, and then put in some prefix that you want. So for example, auto with an underscore means that every file is going to be created with that auto underscore as the beginning of the file name. So I'll cancel out of that, but that's how you would do this. And to clear that feature, if you want the old behavior, then simply go in here and blank that out. Don't set it to 0, but just blank it out. As I've mentioned a couple of times, there are other things that can be done with this, these general tuning parameters. This is also where you would go to set things like, well, for example, within the snapshot subsystem, this is where we would set edit days. This is the number of days that you can go back and edit old data, things like that, and the snapshot event queue size and event queue page size, etc., that we had discussed when we first installed the system. So this is within operations, and we're looking at the tuning parameters. And that's all that needs to be done in order to set up this automatic archive creation. Just simply set this value. Now, if you don't see this value listed, what you'd have to do is choose New. And within New, you can simply type the name of that value in here, Auto Archive Creation, or you can search to see if you're, or excuse me, Auto Archive File Root. And if you don't see it here, you can just type it in. But as you can see, it's right here in this list.